Happy Holy Week. Hope you're having a great day. Just want to share a couple of thoughts, some encouragement, and a little bit of challenge. Is Man, like Easter is coming up this weekend, and such a great time to really think about our faith, think about who Jesus was, and I'm always amazed by people who reduce Jesus down to a verse or two, and try to build their entire faith on a couple of verses out of the Bible. And it just simply, it's really not a wise way to approach a holistic lifestyle of what it means to really be a follower of Jesus. For instance, I'm reminded often people will say, well, Jesus said when he was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said, all the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. And so I think sometimes people want to say, well, what Jesus expects is for me to love God and to be loving to everybody. And so I have to display love exactly like I feel like love should be displayed. But the problem with that kind of thinking is that I don't think we really think through what it means to love. And we have to be reminded, first of all, it's a call to love God with everything in us. And then when we love God that way, we're to love our neighbors the same way that we love ourselves, which we love ourselves a lot. But we can't just say, okay, nothing else matters, because Jesus said all the law and prophets hang on these two things. And so things do matter. So we could say sometimes, well, a person may be compromising, their lifestyle may be compromising to what we see Jesus taught as truth in the Word. And so if that's the case, sometimes that leaves us in confrontational experiences. And I don't think you should ever confront anybody in a hostile way or make them feel judged. But the truth is, sometimes the Word, it judges us. Man, I would be a mess if I didn't have the Word to make a judgment on my life. It's made judgments on my life and continues to make judgments on my life about sin, which sin is any time I'm rebelling from the will of God. So anytime I'm rebelling from something that God has revealed to me as truth, from His Word, not from my own emotions or from what I think or what culture says, but the only thing that I have to know what God is like is what He has recorded in history with His Word. He's given us a historical revelation in the Bible that tells me, okay, man, this is what the Lord expects of me. So sometimes I come across things and I go, man, like I'm missing the mark here. I'm missing the mark on how I'm loving my wife. I'm missing the mark on how my attitude is about this particular thing. And so I can't just take a couple of verses and say, okay, well, I may be missing the mark there, but I love my neighbor. Well, I'm called to love even my enemy, so I'm to love everybody. That's a given. But sometimes love is hard. Like sometimes love requires that I'm willing to have a hard conversation with a brother or sister of mine in the family of God that really could put me in a position where they may reject me because they don't want to receive that truth. And that can be a very difficult thing to do. And I guess what's frustrating for me as a follower of Jesus sometimes is that culturally people, when they don't understand how bound we are as believers to the Word, because it teaches us who God is, and they see us taking a stand for something, they want to say, man, that's unloving. Like Jesus just said to love. And it's unloving what you're saying about this particular situation because you're saying that it's not okay. Well, first of all, I'm not the one saying it's not okay. It's the Word that I'm trying to submit to as a follower, as a servant in the kingdom. I'm not the king. I'm a servant in the kingdom. I'm a servant of the king who calls me to obedience. And so I don't get to redefine his word. And so when we say things like, well, Jesus said to love and you're not being loving because you're what you're saying. No, actually, the people who are saying that are the ones who are not being loving. Because sometimes love is hard and sometimes love confronts. There are often times that I have to say things to my children that are uncomfortable, but they need to be said. And I wasn't put in their lives to be their buddy. I was put in their lives to be their dad and to point them to the Lord and to discipline them sometimes. And so sometimes I have to bring truth into that relationship, and it's not the easiest thing to do. And what Scripture teaches me out of the book of Hebrews is that it would be unloving for me not to do that. So I would say for all of us to use caution before we quote verses, like saying, well, Jesus said to love. Like, here's something for us to ponder. When Jesus said, like, love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Was Jesus violating his own statement when he said this in Mark chapter 7? He says to these guys he's confronting with truth. He says, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Like, did you hear that Jesus said, you hypocrites? Now, I think if Jesus were to say that today, and that it would be blowing up Twitter. Like, it would be all over social media. Did you hear what Jesus said? He called these guys hypocrites. Didn't Jesus say that we're supposed to love everyone? Well, maybe Jesus was loving them in that statement by pointing out error in their lives. So we must be reminded that, yeah, man, sometimes like following Jesus is tough because you take a stand for things that really nobody wants to take a stand for, because you know why? They love themselves more than they love their neighbor, and they don't want to be rejected by their neighbor. So they're violating it in multiple ways. Like, there's layer upon layer, and no freedom is rolling out of their lives. So I want to encourage you, like, make sure as you're living out your faith, you're not trying to simplify the gospel into 2 verses. Like, the gospel is not simplified into verses, it's simplified into your life, laying down your life to be a disciple of Jesus, taking up your cross and dying to yourself every day so that you can love your neighbor the way that you love yourself. And the only way to do that is to be a person who worships Jesus with your heart. And that means you lay it all down. He is king. He calls the shots. And sometimes, honestly, you will be rejected for your faith. And one doesn't need to do anything but read the Gospels to see how many people rejected Jesus because of the truth he stood on. And I would remind you, as we head toward Good Friday, he was crucified for it.